Well, I've been working on the project since the very beginning, since the initial route considerations. My involvement in the process is input into the route in terms of natural hazards. Where is it safe to build? How can we build it? And how can we mitigate the hazards that we can't avoid? Don't forget, we're only going through 18% of the length of the pipeline is in mountainous terrain, the Coast Mountains and the Rocky Mountains. The rest of the pipeline is on plateaus, going in and out of river valleys, going through the mountains. In the Coast Mountains, which is the most severe environment that we're in, we've actually got two 6.5 kilometer long tunnels to avoid the worst of the alpine environment. These are the longest tunnels that I'm aware of that have been considered, certainly in Canada. They're the longest tunnels that I'm aware of that have been considered anywhere. But I think it's a good solution to both the construction issues and the safety issues during construction, as well as the long-term operation of two oil pipelines through that kind of environment. From all the aspects of minimizing the environmental impacts, increasing the safety, getting rid of a lot of natural hazards that we have in those areas, and from the point of view of safely constructing it, it's a really good decision. The seismic environment that we find ourselves on that part of the province is actually much lower. One measure of the acceleration, or one measure of the severity of a seismic event, is the peak ground acceleration. By comparison, where we're sitting here, the 1 in 2,500 year return period, PGA, is 46%, where we're sitting here in Richmond or in Vancouver. The peak on the project under the same terms is about 12%. So we're in a much lower and seismically active environment than Vancouver is. It makes it easier to deal with. I deal with the natural hazards, the things that are there by virtue of the terrain, the topography, the geology, that can affect the pipeline in a potentially adverse way. Big landslides are one of the biggies. They're one of the ones that can potentially generate a line rupture, and that's definitely something we want to avoid. And so wherever possible, we avoid these areas of natural hazards. The biggest ones, quite frankly, are in Alberta. Some of the big slides on some of the big river valleys in the Cretaceous shales and in the glacial lacustrine clay. So we've done some big reroutes. We rerouted the Simonette tens of kilometers south in order to avoid an area of deep-seated slides. We rerouted on the Smoky River several tens of kilometers, again to avoid slides on the river valleys. It's not easy getting across some of these Albertan river valleys. They have a lot of big slides on them. And one of the priorities we put into routing in that part of the world has been to avoid those slides wherever we can. And I think we've done a good job in doing it. Well, I think that any big pipeline project these days recognizes that it's a major priority to provide a safe route. And as a profession, we've come a long way in the last 50 years at doing that. Quite frankly, our level of knowledge is far higher than it was when the first pipelines were built in BC 50 years ago. It's not to say that we can't operate those old pipelines safely nowadays, but we learn things from doing that, and we can avoid some of the problems that on some of the other pipelines we have to spend some time monitoring what's happening. On this pipeline, we just avoid that. It's legitimate to have concern on a mishap. We have concern on a mishap, that's why we try so hard to avoid it. Somebody said to me this morning after my presentation that they hadn't realized the level of effort that we had put nose to the grindstone, walking the terrain, flying the terrain, looking at the terrain over a period of something over 10 years. They hadn't realized the level of effort that's gone into it. You can't say that everything is 100% rosy. There is always some risk. There has to be some impact. At the very least, we have to clear some trees, build a grade, and run it successfully over a period of 50 years. There are some repercussions. We have to balance that in terms of the benefit that we get to society. And I'm convinced that the balance is very much on the positive side for this project. One of the few ways, when you think about it, with a modern pipeline and modern steel, one of the few ways that you can generate a full-bore rupture is through a geotechnical hazard. And as far as the geotechnical hazards are concerned, almost the only way you can do it is with a large landslide, just ripping the pipe in half. And as I said before, we've spent a lot of time avoiding those big landslides because we don't want to try and mitigate them. We don't want to be through them. And so I think that the prospects of the nightmare scenario on the pipeline side of things are really, really small. I do not expect to see it during the operational life of this pipeline.